So Alessandro, I mean, we just finished reviewing Budweiser and doing a full can versus bottle on this one, so we're very familiar with Budweiser now. And I can't help but notice on the can that it says choicest hops, rice, and best barley malt. So I mean, the thing that really fascinates me about that is the rice. I can't think of any other beer off the top of my head that I know of that mentions rice as being a prime ingredient. What do you know about that?
That's a very good question. And it's, to be honest, like that's also something that always fascinated me when looking at the cans of Budweiser and then Bud Light.
Yeah.
They mention rice like as a prime ingredient. You know, if you do a little bit of research, you find out that adjuncts, it's what they're called, like so ingredients that are added to the beer. And by adjuncts, we're talking about like the four main ingredients that everybody refers to are like water, yeast, barley, and hops.
That t-shirt that you have, like it says, that famous t-shirt at this point that you've worn in so many episodes.
That's, you know, and that all goes back to the German purity law, which is something we don't want to talk about here. We can maybe get into that like in a different episode. Another beer legend.
Another beer legend, exactly.
But rice specifically is one of those components that can be added to beer, and it's normally used to add a clean look to the beer and also
Really?
a more light feeling in the mouthfeel and in the overall beer.
So wait, it's about the aesthetic and the mouthfeel? That's what the rice really correlates to in this point? How does it help the look of it? Does it make it more clear? Does it make it more blonde? What does it do?
Yes, because the barley adds this protein structure when it's added to the beer. Like if it's only pure barley, depending on the percentage and the way it's made in the mash bill, in the wort, the proteins can give a little bit of haziness. And if the beer is not, depending on how it's filtered and so on, it can create a little bit of that cloudiness. While rice tends not to do that. So the clean look that you see is one of the elements that for which rice and other types of adjuncts are picked, like to be used. So they provide like the proteins that are needed by the yeast to be fermented to make beer, but it doesn't add that cloudiness.
So when you say an adjunct in terms of something that's added to the beer aside from those four main components, is this something that's added later on in the fermentation process? Is this something that's added at the beginning, or is there not even any kind of rule in terms of when that's added, or is there a variation there?
This is a very good question. And there's two different types of way you can add adjuncts to the beer. Like you can add them main ways. Like you can add it during the mashing process, or you can add it during the boiling process. So for example, an example of when you're adding them during the boiling process is a lot of Belgian beers are adding the sugars during the boiling process. In the case of rice, most of the times it's added during the mashing process, but because rice needs to be boiled to a higher temperature in order to reach the point where it can be broken down by the yeast, it needs to be boiled separately and then added to the rest of the mash bill when the beer is produced. So there's actually like a whole process in the production. And again, I don't know all the precise details, but doing a little bit of research, this seems to be one of the things that most people like agree on, like that you have to create like different boiling points in order to make the rice digestible for the yeast.
That's kind of fascinating. And we're thinking like the Anheuser-Busch breweries are kind of boiling rice separately before adding it to the beer. Like when you think of when you boil rice, I mean, the water in the rice becomes kind of cloudy, right? And then it's because it gets filled with all those starches. So you would think that adding rice would actually create sort of like a cloudy element to the beer, as opposed to creating something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, like you said it would be at the beginning.
It's a distinctive character that sets this beer apart. And another thing that I was reading about Budweiser, just to mention, is the fact that it is lagered on chips off beechwood, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
Because it's something that, it adds, a lot of different possible talks about, like, can you taste them in there? And there's people that say, like, yeah, because they're treated before, so they're all the wood elements are extracted, so you shouldn't be able to taste them. They're only used like for purposes of where the yeast is layering, and there's a lot of different theories out there. But again, like it's a beer that I wouldn't have thought of like using wood in the process.
Well, there you go, guys. The king of beers, Budweiser. Full of surprises.